For over 60 years, a single treaty has pretty much managed the lifeblood of an entire region. We're talking about the waters of the Indus River system. But a major event in April 2025 has put that whole framework in jeopardy. Today, we're going to dive into a report from the Institute of Strategic Studies Islamabad that really explores what happens when that lifeline is suddenly and unexpectedly put on hold.
Okay, let's jump right in. The source we're looking at today, well, it doesn't mince words. It frames the suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty not just as some diplomatic tiff, but as a historic, game-changing moment. This quote right here really sets the stage for just how high the stakes are for everyone involved. And this timeline, wow, it puts that dramatic shift into perfect perspective. For 65 years, through actual wars and all kinds of crises, this agreement was a constant. It was a framework for cooperation. And then, boom. In April 2025, all that long-standing stability just gave way to this huge cloud of uncertainty.
All right, so to really wrap our heads around this, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. We'll start with the suspension itself, then unpack why the treaty is such a lifeline, look at the water crisis that was already brewing, trace the ripple effects, and finally, check out the proposed path forward. So, what in the world happened in April 2025 to trigger such a massive, monumental decision?
Well, according to the report, the immediate catalyst was an attack on tourists. The source states that, in response, India unilaterally suspended the treaty, placing blame on Pakistan without an investigation. Now, the crucial point the report makes is that Pakistan completely rejected this, viewing it as a clear violation of international law. So right from the get-go, this wasn't some mutual agreement. It was a contentious move that set the stage for a major dispute. Okay, to really understand why this suspension is such a seismic event, we get to look at what the treaty actually does. Why is it so important? At its heart, the treaty is basically a rule book for sharing water. Brokered by the World Bank way back in 1960, it created a super clear division. India got control over the eastern rivers, and Pakistan got control over the western ones. This simple split was designed specifically to prevent conflict over a resource that, let's face it, everybody needs to survive. And the treaty was about so much more than just who gets what water. It created a legal framework, it required the sharing of critical data, we're talking stuff needed for flood prediction, and it laid out ways to solve disagreements. For Pakistan, which is the downstream country, it was basically a shield against any sudden decisions made upstream. And the need for that shield becomes incredibly, powerfully clear with this one number. A staggering 80% of Pakistan's irrigated agriculture, the farms that feed the whole nation and are a huge part of the economy, depends on water from the Indus River system, which is governed by this very treaty. 80%! Now, this is absolutely critical to understand. This treaty suspension didn't just happen in a vacuum. It landed on a nation that was already dealing with a severe and worsening water crisis. This number is just stark. By 2025, the amount of water available per person in Pakistan is projected to drop to just 860 cubic meters. Now, to put that in perspective for you, the internationally recognized line for water scarcity is 1,000 cubic meters, so the country is already way below that line. And you can see that alarming journey right here on this chart. It shows a nosedive from over 5,000 cubic meters per person back in 1951 to hitting that scarcity line in 2016, and now it's projected to fall even further. This is a crystal clear picture of a country moving from being water-stressed to legitimately water-starved. This comparison right here really shines a light on a key vulnerability. Pakistan has about 30 days of water storage capacity. A month, that's it. Now, compare that to India's 170 days, and it's way, way below the recommended international minimum of 120 days. This means there's almost no buffer to handle any kind of disruption. So, what happens when you take that sudden, unpredictable treaty suspension and you layer it on top of this already fragile situation? Well, the report details an immediate and pretty dangerous ripple effect. The source points to 3 immediate problems. First, the flow of data just stops. That makes it way harder to prepare for things like floods. Second, the risk of unpredictable water releases goes up. Too much water could cause floods, too little could cause droughts. And third, without predictable data on water flow, farmers can't plan their crops, which directly impacts how much food gets grown.
And why does that disruption to farming matter so much? Because agriculture isn't just a small piece of Pakistan's economy, it's the absolute backbone. It makes up nearly a quarter of the entire GDP and employs almost 40% of the workforce. It's huge. So the potential knock-on effects, as outlined in the source, are just profound. We're talking threats to staple food crops like wheat and rice, the risk of deeper rural poverty, a hit to key exports like cotton and basmati rice, and it could even fuel a wave of migration from rural areas into cities that are already overcrowded.
Okay, so faced with this whole cascade of risks, the report doesn't just diagnose the problem and leave it at that. It actually proposes a really comprehensive strategy for how Pakistan can navigate this crisis. The strategy they lay out is multi-pronged, mixing external pressure with building internal strength. On the outside, the report calls for engaging in diplomacy and preparing legal challenges to get the treaty back on track. On the inside, it recommends a major push to build resilience by fast-tracking new dams, modernizing irrigation, managing groundwater better, and developing their own independent data systems. It's a whole-of-society approach. And ultimately, the source leaves us with this powerful idea, which kind of reframes the entire issue. The argument here is that at its very heart, this isn't about politics or leverage. It's about a fundamental human right and the responsible management of a shared life-sustaining resource. And that brings us to our final slide and the final question. The whole situation with the Indus Waters Treaty raises a question that goes way beyond just India and Pakistan. As our climate changes and resources get more and more scarce all over the world, how are we going to choose to manage them? As a basis for cooperation or as a weapon of conflict? That's the huge question this entire situation forces all of us to confront.